This show talks about everything current and relevant in the law of personal injuries, and that is relevant to you, the viewer. My name's Tony Carbone. I'm a personal injury lawyer of over 25 years' experience. With me tonight, I've got Nunzio Tartaglia, a partner in a law firm. Good evening, Nunz.
Tony, Sarah, viewers, welcome.
And Sarah Snowden, the senior lawyer running superannuation in a law firm. Good evening, Sarah.
Evening, Tony. Evening, viewers.
And tonight, viewers, we're going to be doing an update on superannuation, and we're going to bring on board a former client who's going to talk about his own personal experiences, Darren Blyth. So stay tuned for that.
Tony, before we kick off, what's in the news?
Well, Nunzio, there's been a lot of stories, but this one here is absolutely outrageous. Fatal flight oversight. The coroner slams an unsafe pilot permit. What are the facts there, Nunz?
Tony, this is a terrible story in which a veteran pilot unfortunately was killed with him and his passenger in the plane. But what the real story behind it is that he had a suspended pilot licence but was still allowed to fly. This kills me, the story, Tony, because I said, how could he be allowed up there? You tell me that.
Well, look, Sarah, this fellow used to suffer from epileptic fits and wasn't allowed to fly and somehow escaped the clutches of CASA, which is a governing body.
Yeah,
it's just bizarre, isn't it?
Tony, it looks like they've cancelled his professional licence, but haven't actually cancelled his private licence, which meant that he was still allowed to take people out on joy flights, even though he had the other licence suspended for that exact reason, for having those epileptic seizures.
I just can't believe. The lady would have a claim, surely, for nervous shock, wouldn't she?
Of course, I understand she's making a claim against, as you said, Tony, the governing body, and she would definitely have a claim for nervous shock because there's no way he should have been allowed in the air by himself, let alone with a passenger. So, and the poor girl, she bought the plane ride for her boyfriend. It's a sad state of affairs. And
also, she'd have a claim for dependency, wouldn't she?
Yeah, look, if she's relying on him for income and the like, could be a claim for that. Obviously, her pain and suffering, medical expenses, a range of things. And look, the sympathy factor in this story is huge. So, look, this could be high damages.
And even the pilot, it's just outrageous that... I feel sorry for him too, because, I mean, I would have thought that he's gone up there thinking I might be okay, but obviously with pretty disastrous consequences.
Tony, I don't feel sorry for him. He knew that I think there was history that he was getting seizures and the like, so he was aware of the fact that he had a condition, was aware that he had a passenger with him. I don't feel sorry for him at all.
Sarah, there's a very interesting story about a man getting attacked by a pig. Now, I wouldn't be I got bitten in the leg once by a dog. I couldn't shake him off and he probably weighed about 20 kilos. But this boar weighed 280 kilograms and it was some guy's pet pig.
Tony, this is a story where Mr. Robert Dennis has been attacked by Nigel the pig, as you said, a 280-kilo boar. It's bitten him on the upper thigh, resulting in him needing 25 stitches. And as a result of the boar attack, they've actually had a settlement in the amount of $25,000.
Well, Nonce, he got $1,000 a stitch. I reckon if it was you, he would have got $4,000 a stitch.
Well, it's an odd story, obviously, and I understand that the boar has been relocated to a stud farm. But look, Tony, it's probably more common in more dog attacks that we have these type of things. But boar, dog, doesn't matter what it is. The fact is, you've got a liability and responsibility to make sure that your animals or your pets are in your control. Must be guarded.
Who paid the $25,000? Did that come straight out of the owner's pocket?
Look, it doesn't say, but I think it'd be out of his own pocket or obviously his insurance. Homeowner's insurance. And look, that's why it's important to have insurance because, look, sometimes, your animals can come loose and if it does, it can be very expensive. And look, obviously, $1,000 a stitch, but if there's a lot more catastrophic damage, it could go into hundreds of thousands.
I reckon it should have been worth more than that. But anyway, the thing that we've got to be careful of is this. Because there's been an increase in the number of dog attacks, and once upon a time you'd be picked up by your homeowner's insurance, people should be careful when they take out these policies because it might be an exclusion. So they've got to be specifically asking for coverage if they've got an animal that is a dog that's likely to cause damage. Is that correct?
No doubt. And look, Tony, I've come across certain cases where unfortunately there's been no insurance and we've had trouble obviously getting any money from the actual defendant himself because, look, not a lot of people are flush with cash. It's not that common. So it's really important you got insurance because then you just pass it on, they take care of it, and look, your premiums go up, but at least, yeah, that's it. It's the cost of doing business, really.
Sarah, this is a very bizarre and outrageous matter where a whistleblower has lost her job because she's uncovered a story where a lady in a nursing home had drowned in a pond, and they then told the employees to put it off as a heart attack. Now, there's CCTV cameras. Are these people fools or what?
Tony, this is a really this is a really disturbing story, particularly since a lot of people, particularly this lady who actually had dementia as well, families put them in there hoping that they're going to get that specialised care and be looked after. Now, obviously, there's a bit of a concern that they, one, didn't have the facilities to actually look after her, but two, left her like that for 50 minutes and then tried to cover it up afterwards.
Well, she's wandered off, Nunz,
Yeah.
and she's fallen
Fell
in
into the
and
pool.
obviously probably knocked her head
Yep.
and drowned.
But as Sarah said, 50 minutes head down in the pool, and to have the nerve to cover it up, I just don't.
just
I
blatant.
don't understand it. Look, one, it's blatant, and look, I'm so glad that she's come forward because the family were obviously thinking she's died of a heart attack or whatever it is, and look, it's terrible.
Tell you what, there could be some serious consequences or repercussions coming out of this, don't you think?
But look, Tony, I said it's there's two stories about this and also the aviation story. It really is disturbing, unfortunately.
It's outrageous
Yeah.
again, isn't it? What about these ice users and paramedics are scared to treat them these days? Sarah, what's the best solution to that problem?
Look, Tony, I think it's going to be an ongoing issue, and it's a new one that's come up with in relation to this new type of drug, as opposed to 10 years ago it was the heroin issue. Look, there's no easy answer to this. Paramedics are obviously a bit intimidated and frightened to attend these sort of scenes. You don't want them being afraid to do that because you want them to get treatment. There's a few things they could take into consideration, perhaps looking at security, attending or police escorting the paramedics to such scenes. But I think an important thing to look at is education early on in the schools, particularly again the increase was in the younger users from 15 to 29. So I think early education is definitely something that could assist with perhaps lowering that number and therefore not having as many paramedics having to attend scenes.
Well, Nunz, it's obviously going to be a resourcing issue. You're going to need security, aren't you? Seriously.
Exactly right. Look, as Sarah said, whether it be security or education, all that costs time, all that and money. So, again, it's going to be a resource issue, and I'm sure the government will say that they can't put enough resources into it to get to a proper level.
Well, if they don't get security, the reality is someone could die because they won't get treated, correct?
And then they may be liable.
Exactly. So liability could extend at both ends.
Yeah, that's right.
We've got to go to a sponsors break, viewers, so please stay tuned. After a break, we're going to have Darren Blyth tell us all about his own personal experiences. Viewers, welcome back to the show. Tonight we're talking about superannuation and how it impacts on you, the viewer. Tonight we've got a special guest. His name's Darren Blyth. Good evening, Darren.
Good evening, Tony.
Darren's one of the clients that we've looked after in the past to try and get his entitlements under his superannuation fund. And he was represented by Sarah. Good evening, Sarah. How are you?
Evening, Tony. Evening, viewers.
And Sarah, first and foremost, before we get into Darren's story, tell us a bit about what dictates and what is the applicable legislation when it comes to taking your superannuation benefits out.
There's a couple of benefits that people can look at under their superannuation policy. The first one is their account balance that has been paid by the employer, and they're compulsory contributions, Tony, that the employer has to make at a rate of 9.25%. There is also insurance benefits that people may have, both for disability, so for income protection and TPD, and in the case of terminal illness, you can also have death cover.
So there's a number of benefits you're entitled to.
That's
They're
correct.
governed by the actual policy itself, and also there's the Superannuation Industry Supervision Regulations 1994 Act.
That's correct, Tony.
Commonwealth.
Yes.
And that sets out certain circumstances where you can take benefits out.
That's right, Tony. That section of the Act sets out when you can get early release of your entitlements. So in circumstances where you cannot work, you're having financial difficulty, or you need money to assist with medical or hospital expenses, it sets out the ways in which you can
or to
get
pay
those.
off your mortgage and things
That's
like
right.
that.
Yes.
Darren, tell us a bit about your background and what actually happened to you.
I've been a gardener for over 20 years, and during the course of working with a local council, I slipped off the edge of a trailer and tore all the cartilage from the bone in the knee, in the right leg.
And it's a very nasty injury, isn't it, Darren?
Oh, it definitely was. It came with a lot of pain and a lot of discomfort, and definitely set me back for the future as well.
One of the things about your job, Darren, is that it required a lot of personal exertion. Lifting, bending, twisting, movements. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you engaged Sarah to represent you and look after your case. Is that correct?
That's correct as well.
Sarah, tell us a bit about the difficulties you encountered with this case.
Well, Darren's case was a little bit different than most TPD claims, Tony, in that a general definition requirement for TPD to get approved is that the injured person be unable to work for at least 6 months and be at the end of that 6 months be unlikely ever to return to work for which they're reasonably suited by education, training and experience. Now, in Darren's policy, it went that one step further and actually required the fund to consider whether he would be able to return to work if he underwent reasonable retraining.
Or rehabilitation.
That's right. So when you look at cases that you can undertake retraining, I mean, there's a lot of things people can do if they do undertake retraining, and given that extra step, was really quite difficult to get across the line because most policies, if you need retraining, you're TPD.
Darren, you're an intelligent guy, so chances are you could have been retrained or put into a different industry.
Yeah, that's correct. The hardest thing I found with the case was the restrictions I had on the medical certificate. I have restrictions where I've got to avoid standing for certain periods of time, sitting for certain periods of time, and lifting, bending and stairs. And when you looked at jobs even for retraining, no one actually wanted to employ someone in my situation that had all those restrictions. So it virtually limited me in the whole market, the workplace market.
Okay. Just curiously, you had your accident and you're off work for quite a deal of time.
Yep.
How were you surviving? Because you've got a wife and a couple of kids?
Yeah, got 2 kids and a partner, and it was very difficult. The money was getting stretched left, right and centre. Put the mortgage on hold on financial hardship for 6 months, and luckily enough, when the financial hardship was about to run out, the case was settled and the money came through and the financial pressure definitely came off.
Just on that business about financial hardship, does that mean you approached your banker and said, look, I've had an injury, I'm going through this process of trying to get my superannuation benefits, can you put the mortgage on hold? Is that correct?
That's correct. I first asked the mortgage provider and they first said no, so I went to a financial counsellor who then rang up and did all the dealing for me and negotiated a 6-month hold on the mortgage.
Okay. And could they have extended that if the case had kept going?
They could have. What the next move would have been with the mortgage company is they would have actually applied to access my super and take it directly out of all the accounts or the one account that I had, and that would have went directly onto the mortgage.
Okay. Now, 6 months doesn't sound like a long time to get one of these claims over the line, Darren, although in your case, every day would have seemed like an eternity. How did you cope in that period?
It was very stressful. It put a lot of pressure on the family environment, knowing that there was money coming, but when it was going to come was the hardest thing. I think not being able to give the kids things they were used to having, that probably hurt the most. And it's just been good now to be back on track and be able to give them little things without spoiling them too much.
Sarah, Darren's plight would have been a lot of stress on a lawyer to try and, I guess, contain his expectations, because I mean, Darren's expectation is to get the money from the super fund, but there's always a risk because of his age and the fact that he presents well that he may not have got the money. Is that correct?
That's correct, Tony. In Darren's case, he also had some prior training, so tertiary training as well and tertiary education, and that all comes into play when you're pursuing these sort of claims. The one thing that did work in Darren's favour in this case was that when the funds have to look at any retraining that someone can undertake, particularly someone that's, that presents well, that could go back to school to retrain, is whether or not in light of that retraining, they're still likely to obtain employment in the real world. So as Darren said, given the fact that as soon as people found out about the injuries, particularly potential employers, they found out about the work cover claim, they just didn't want to have a bar of employing him, whether or not he was retrained and quite capable of performing a job or not. So that's a real difficulty that a lot of people face in these claims.
Well, Darren, just tell us a bit, because it's hard for someone that hasn't got the injury to understand. You're sitting down right now, okay. What are the symptoms that you get?
With the knee, it'll crunch and crack a lot. It'll come with extreme swelling, pain. As I'm sitting now, it's not too bad. But if I'm to get up out of this chair, once the cameras stop rolling, it'll crunch and crack for probably the next half hour. And
you obviously take medication or get treatment for it?
Yeah, I do self-physio at home, which the physios taught me to do, and I take Panadine Forte as needed for pain relief.
Okay. Viewers, we're going to have to go to a sponsors break. Stay tuned, because after the break, we're going to continue with Darren's story and also get Sarah to enlighten you on what you need to do to protect your rights and entitlements if you get injured. Viewers, welcome back to the show. Tonight's episode is very, very important to you, the viewer, because we're talking about superannuation, what rights you might have, and what do you do in case you get injured. Because a lot of people out there just don't know, Sarah and Darren, that when you do get injured, you've got certain benefits under your total and permanent disability policy attached to your superannuation fund.
That's right.
And there's also other benefits which pick up hardship and also mortgage relief if you cannot return to work, and you've got to satisfy probably a 6 months period where you can't work. Is that correct, Sarah?
Well, it depends on what benefit they're applying for, Tony. Insurance benefits, yes, generally if it's a lump sum. For early release, you generally just have to show the hardship. Sometimes they require you to be on Centrelink for a little while, but most of those are capped at $10,000 too, so it's just a short-term relief. But something that is accessible for people in trouble. But
I mean, people that are really, really in diabolical circumstances, 10,000 can assist somewhat, can't it, Darren?
Oh, definitely. It can just give you a little bit of breathing space at home financially.
Darren, you said that you wanted to get what you're entitled to, but you're 40 years of age, which doesn't make you that old.
That's correct.
And quite frankly, you're not middle-aged anymore, because now they've shifted the boundary. I think you've got to be 50 to be middle-aged. So, and they've written you off essentially to give you your benefits, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. You've been through a lot of adversity in your life, correct?
Correct.
You've had a lot of issues with your partner, health-wise, she was injured herself, and she's also had her own personal problems.
That's correct.
Now, and you've got the 2 children.
Yes, definitely.
And I guess there's nothing worse than when you've got 2 people in the one house that have got health issues, and you've got to contend with financial problems.
Oh, that's for sure. The pressure it puts on in the family environment, I just wouldn't wish it on anyone else. It's a terrible thing to go through, and I'm just glad that I finally got through it and I can see a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, Sarah, how did you keep Darren at bay during this period? Because he would have been on the phone and really hounding, and there's not much you can do apart from follow the processes.
Yeah, it was really stressful for Darren, and I think the best way that we were able to help him and was to keep him involved at every step along the process, Tony. So keep him updated, making sure that he was aware that there is some time constraints in these policies, that they do take a little time because of the number of departments involved, not just at the fund level, but at the insurers level, and then at administration, trustee. So there's a lot of parties that have a part to play in these claims, but keeping him involved, I think, at every step of the way and maintain that regular contact, I hope made it a lot easier for him.
That's it. Now, Sarah, one of the things that's concerning is this. When you sign off on a TPD superannuation insurance, you're effectively telling the fund manager and the trustees that you're not going to work again. Is that correct?
To a certain extent, yes. As I touched on earlier, it does depend on the policy definition. Everyone's policy is different. But, you know, if you've got someone that's worked in the same industry for their whole life, they may have limited education, they may have always done manual labouring roles, it is really tough for them to get back out there and get other jobs. And, you know, that's what we're applying for these entitlements for, because they're going to struggle going forwards to be able to retrain to get into some other sort of industry.
Well, in Darren's case, because he's only 40 years of age, I'd has to guess that he'd want to keep trying to get something. What do you think you could do, Darren? I mean, if you had to do anything.
Look, if I've still been applying for work, trying to find jobs, someone that'd employ me in a supervisor's role where I can limit the amount of time that I'm actually standing and sitting and sort of self-manage, similar to the physio work I do. So when I know I'm getting sore, I need to have that time where I can just go to the side, have a little bit of time to myself just to get the knee right so I don't damage it any further. And
Sarah, just on that issue there, if Darren were to get some sort of work, how would he protect himself in terms of the fact that he's signed off as being total and permanent disabled?
Well, look, at the time that Darren applied, he had attempted on numerous occasions to apply for work that was sort of taking into consideration the limitations that had been placed on him. Unfortunately, an employer didn't want to have a bar of him because of those injuries. And going forward, I think that though it's great that Darren's still trying to apply for work, he's going to be very limited in what he can apply for, and it's really going to have to sort of be sheltered to meet his needs. So if you can find someone, an employer that would, you know, facilitate his limitations with standing and with sitting and, you know, with having to take breaks and maybe very limited hours, you know, on every second or every third day, then, you know, that's something that he can still look at going forward. But that does not mean that he wasn't entitled to the benefit that he received.
Well, just curiously, assuming Darren was 25 to 30 years of age, and you've got to satisfy that part of the definition that talks about retraining and rehabilitation.
Yep.
How do you think you would have gone there?
I think it would have been made a lot more difficult in that case. Age plays a major role in these claims, no matter what sort of definition it is. And I guess then too, it also then depends on the injury, because younger people tend to rehabilitate a lot easier than, you know, people that are sort of at that middle age sort of mark. So they do struggle a little bit more with rehabilitation. The body's getting a little bit older. But look, the other thing too is that retraining for younger people can be a lot easier because they've got the, you know, they're brought up in an age of technology and it's a lot more efficient
and the body's
to get that
got
retraining.
More chance of rejuvenating itself.
That's right.
When you're younger. Darren, if you're 50, chances are they would have accepted the claim a lot quicker too, wouldn't they?
Yeah, probably, definitely.
Just with the children, what do you do with them?
Look, with the children, it's just been good to financially now, by having some money come back in and know that I've got the security where we don't have to sell our home, that we build up to a stage that we like. It's given them some stress-free time as well, because I think they felt the stress. You don't actually, they don't come out and tell you that they're stressed over the situation, but just in the way that they act and things they do around the house, when I look back at it now, I know they definitely were stressed.
And Sarah, is there anything you'd like to tell the viewers about, you know, their entitlements and rights? And
Absolutely. Look, if you've suffered an injury or illness, or you know someone that's suffered an injury or illness, they may have entitlements under a superannuation policy or a separate insurance policy that's been taken out, Tony. They should definitely contact a solicitor and seek advice, because it's definitely worth pursuing those entitlements.
And is there anything else you could add, Darren?
Oh, look, I'd just like to add to anyone that's out there, don't listen to other people tell you that you don't have a claim or you're not entitled to something. You're best going and seeking out legal advice.
Viewers, look, there's no doubt that there's quite a few people out there that have got similar circumstances to Darren. You're not sure what to do. Send us your Twitter comments and maybe some Facebook, and we'll get back to you and see what we can do to assist. Sarah, thanks for coming on board. Darren? Thanks for coming on board. We'll get you here another time, I think.
Thanks for having me.
Viewers, send us your comments on Twitter and Facebook. Go to past episodes on our website. Stay tuned for future episodes. And remember always to stay safe.